aliens boasted about their long lifespan. Until they encountered a human. The Council of Elders, a collective of the galaxy's most ancient and wise species, sat in their grand chamber, observing the stars from their towering citadel. Across the table, representatives from over 100 different civilizations gathered, each one eager to boast about the strength, wisdom, and endurance of their people. In the center of the room stood a towering figure, a Zarkan, one of the oldest species in the universe. Its gray skin shimmered with age, and its eyes gleamed with the knowledge of millennia. The Zarkan leader spoke, their deep voice resonating through the chamber. Our species has existed for over 500,000 years, the Zarkan leader boasted, and in all that time, we have never known a single member of our race to perish from old age. Our bodies regenerate, and our minds remain sharp, even as the cosmos shifts around us. We are immortal. A murmur of awe rippled through the room. The others nodded in agreement. Their lifespans were impressive. Some had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, while others had mastered the art of transcending their physical forms entirely. But the Zarkan's claim was unparalleled. Next, a grell, an insectoid species known for their hive-like society, clicked their mandibles in anticipation. Our lifespan is nothing short of astounding, the grell representative said. The queen of our hive has ruled for over 200,000 years. We regenerate each time we are injured. Time holds no sway over us. The chamber grew quieter as more species shared their own impressive tales of longevity. A Xantharian, a race of crystalline beings, claimed their consciousness had been passed down for 1,000,000 years. A Solan, a gaseous life form, shared stories of existing across star systems for eons. Finally, a small, humanoid figure, a human, stood at the back of the room, listening intently. No one had yet acknowledged the human's presence, for their species was young, just a few thousand years old in the grand scheme of the universe. Most of the alien species here had never paid much attention to humans, dismissing them as a fleeting anomaly in the greater scheme of things. But the human raised their hand. A ripple of curiosity spread across the chamber as the others turned to look at the newcomer. Yes? The Zarkan leader asked, its voice laced with a hint of amusement. The human smiled, a quiet confidence emanating from them. I'm sorry to interrupt, the human said, but I couldn't help but notice how long you all claim to live. 500,000 years, 200,000 years, even 1,000,000 years. That's quite impressive. The aliens exchanged glances, a few even nodded in agreement, impressed by the human's politeness. But, the human continued, how long do you think humans live? A few species chuckled. How long could they possibly last? A grell muttered. The Zarkan leader, still with a smile on its face, answered, well, your lifespan is relatively short. No, 80, maybe 100 years at most? The human nodded. Yes, we live around 80 to 100 years, on average. They paused, eyes glinting with a quiet fire. But there's something you're all overlooking. You've all lived for millennia, and you've seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But how many of you are still living right now? How many of you have experienced your own existence through the ages? The Zarkan, though wise, was confused. What do you mean? The human's smile widened. You've all had time to grow. But that's the difference between us. We don't have time to waste. Every single day we live, we know it's precious. We're constantly aware that we don't have forever. And that urgency, that drive to make every moment count, is what fuels us. The human paused, glancing at the other alien representatives, who seemed to be considering the words. The human continued, their voice soft but powerful. Yes, we may not live for hundreds of thousands of years, but we're here, we're alive, right now, and in that short span, we build, we create, we destroy, we love, we grow, sometimes faster than any of you ever could. Because we don't have the luxury of endless time, we make every day matter. The room fell silent. It was as if the weight of the human's words had crushed through the veneer of immortality that so many of the elders had wrapped themselves in. The Zarkan leader, for the first time in centuries, seemed to hesitate. You say you live in the moment, that you make each second count. Exactly, the human replied. Our lifespan is short, but in that short time, we experience the world in ways you can't imagine. We live fully because we know it won't last. The grell, the insectoid leader, clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. Perhaps, you are right. We have the luxury of time, and yet, we do not always appreciate it as we should. The human stepped forward, locking eyes with the Zarkan leader. You've lived 500,000 years, and you've seen everything, so you believe you've seen it all. But we're just beginning, and in the next 100 years, we might surprise you. The Zarkan's gaze softened, as if seeing the human for the first time. And that, the human added, is what makes us dangerous, not our short lifespan, but our potential. The room remained still for a long time, the weight of the human's words sinking in. They had boasted about their long lifespans, but it was the human's brief existence that had given them something they hadn't considered in eons, an urgency to truly live. And so, the Council of Elders learned a valuable lesson that day. Time, no matter how long, was no guarantee of meaning. It was how you used it that truly mattered, and in that, humanity had far outstripped them all. As the silence in the chamber lingered, a ripple of realization spread through the room. For the first time, the immortals, those who had lived for countless eons, felt something they had never truly experienced, the weight of time. The Zarkan leader, its long, centuries-old thoughts now jumbled in a rare moment of doubt, looked toward the human. What you speak of, is it really so? It asked quietly, its deep voice tinged with something like reverence. You live only a brief span of time, but you are aware of it, and in that awareness, you push yourselves further than any of us ever could? The human smiled, their eyes steady. Yes, we may be young, but that's our strength. We're in a constant race against time, and in doing so, we accomplish things that others might never think possible. We don't wait, we act. An ancient Solon, a gaseous being whose form floated like a cloud of sentient vapor, spoke next. Its voice was like the echo of wind passing through an endless canyon. We have existed for longer than you could comprehend. Our civilization has seen the rise and fall of thousands of worlds. We have watched everything, yet, we have never felt the need to do anything in such a hurry. The human's gaze was kind but firm, and that's exactly why you're stagnating. You've seen everything, but you've stopped living. You no longer chase new dreams or risks. You've become so accustomed to time that you've forgotten the urgency that gives life its meaning. The room shifted uncomfortably, a sudden vulnerability creeping into the once proud beings who had governed galaxies. It wasn't just their bodies that had begun to feel the weight of their endless years, it was their minds. Their hearts, too. They had become complacent, detached from the immediacy of life. The universe no longer felt like a place to explore and conquer, but rather a passive backdrop to their immortal existence. A sharp, clicking sound filled the room as the Grell representative spoke again. You are suggesting we have lost something? Its mandibles clicked faster as it considered the human's words. But we have no need for haste. We evolve slowly, naturally. Time has no end for us. Perhaps, the human answered thoughtfully. But sometimes it's not about what we've achieved. It's about the way we experience the journey. You've lived longer than anyone here. And yet, do you remember every moment of your existence? Or do you simply drift, waiting for the next cycle of time to pass? The Zarkan, who had once spoken so proudly of their immortality, now looked down at their hands, pondering the question. I do not recall the first few thousand years of my life with clarity, they admitted, their voice quieter now. Perhaps we become so accustomed to eternity that we forget what it means to truly live. The human's smile softened. That's the difference. We don't forget. Every day, every hour, every minute is precious because we know it won't last forever. Our existence is fleeting, so we make it count. That's why we live as we do. A long pause followed. The vast council of elders, with all their wisdom and age, found themselves confronted with a truth they had long ago dismissed. It wasn't their long lifespans that made them superior, it was their drive, their passion, and their unyielding will to live fully in the moment. They had grown too comfortable, too passive in their immortality. The humans, for all their fleeting years, lived with an intensity that none of them had ever considered before. One by one, the representatives began to speak. Perhaps there is something we have missed, said the Solon. Your people, despite their short lives, have managed to bring about more change in a few centuries than we have in millennia. Perhaps the value of time is not in its length, but in how we use it. The Grell clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. Yes, we must remember the importance of urgency in our existence, not just the slow, methodical pace of our hive, but a drive to act, to leave our mark in the cosmos. The Zarkan leader, now gazing out at the stars, nodded slowly. Your words have made us reflect. We have had all the time in the universe, and yet we have squandered it by failing to live. We have let time slip by, rather than embracing it. The human looked around at the assembled leaders. It's never too late to start living. In the end, time is a gift, not a curse. It's the one thing none of us can control. But how we choose to spend it, that's what defines us. The atmosphere in the chamber had shifted. The once distant, detached species were now considering the humans' words. It was as if they were awakening from a long slumber, realizing that, despite their great ages, they had allowed their own immortality to dull their sense of wonder. And for the first time, the human didn't feel small. In fact, they felt a quiet pride. The universe might be vast, and their species might be young, but in this moment, humanity had shown the galaxy that it was not the length of life that mattered, it was how you chose to live it. As the Council of Elders dispersed, they were not the same beings they had been before. They had learned, perhaps too late, that living for an eternity meant nothing if you never truly lived at all. And so, the human, with their short, fleeting life, had changed the course of an entire galaxy, not with weapons, not with knowledge, but with a simple truth: the greatest strength in the universe was not the power to survive, but the ability to truly live. In the days that followed the council meeting, the galaxy's most ancient species found themselves at a crossroads. No longer could they boast about their long lifespans and the endless accumulation of knowledge. Instead, a sense of unease settled in as they began to confront the true meaning of their existence. The Zarkan, for centuries revered as the greatest of the immortals, took the first step. Their leader convened a new council of younger Zarkan, those who had only lived a few 100,000 years. It was an odd meeting, one where the ancient wisdom of the species was paired with the fresh, energetic perspectives of the younger generations. The Zarkan leader spoke with a rare humility. We have lived for so long, but we have failed to live as we should. We have let time consume us, and we forgot what it means to be truly alive. It's time we changed that. The younger Zarkan were quick to agree, and together, they began to rethink their place in the cosmos. They realized that it was not enough to simply exist. They had to embrace the experience of living with the same intensity that the humans did, despite their much shorter lifespan. Meanwhile, the Grell, who had long since perfected the art of efficiency through their hive system, gathered in their vast tunnels to discuss what the human had said. Their queen, a being older than most stars, considered the words carefully. The human spoke of urgency. Perhaps we have lost that urgency. The cycles of our hive have become predictable, and our lives have turned into mere repetition. Maybe we have forgotten the power of change. For the first time in their history, the Grell began to challenge their societal norms. The queen issued a decree: the hive would experiment with new ways of thinking, encouraging more individual expression and creativity. It was a radical shift for their society, but it brought with it a new sense of purpose. The Solans, gaseous beings who existed as a collective consciousness, were the hardest to convince. Their species had transcended the physical form long ago and were content to drift through space, existing beyond the concept of time. They had no need for urgency, no need for change, but the humans' words had planted a seed in their minds. We have no physical bodies, one of the Solans said during a meeting, but perhaps we have forgotten the importance of experience. Perhaps we have become so content in our endless existence that we no longer seek to grow. And so, the Solans began to experiment with a concept that was foreign to them: growth. They sought to connect with other species in ways they hadn't done in millennia, allowing their consciousness to experience new forms of existence. It wasn't the same as physical life, but it was a step toward embracing the unknown, toward rediscovering the joy of becoming rather than merely being. Across the galaxy, the message of the human began to resonate. The immortal species who had once thought themselves invincible and above the need for change now found themselves confronted with the truth of their stagnation. Time had dulled them, but the fleeting nature of the human life had reminded them of something they had long since lost: the fire of existence. One of the most profound changes occurred among the humans themselves. The story of the human who had spoken so boldly in front of the galaxy's elders spread like wildfire through their own species. It became a source of inspiration. People who had once felt small in the grand scope of the universe now understood their true power, their potential. Humanity, in its relative youth, began to push boundaries even further. New ideas flourished. Cities rose in mere decades. Scientific discoveries that once seemed impossible were achieved in the blink of an eye. The humans, now aware of their precious time, set out to accomplish in their short lifespans what would take others eons. The human representative who had spoken so candidly in the council meeting became something of a hero among their people, though they humbly deflected the title. "I didn't do anything special," they often said. "I just told the truth. It's you who are capable of more than you realize." And yet, that truth had sparked a chain of events that would reshape the galaxy. The ancient species began to teach their younger generations the value of living with purpose and urgency, no longer waiting for time to be their ally. The concept of immortality, once synonymous with wisdom and superiority, was slowly replaced by a new understanding. Longevity was no longer a measure of strength. The ability to adapt and embrace life was. One by one, the elder species began to visit Earth, intrigued by the energy and passion they saw in humanity. They sought counsel, shared knowledge, and found themselves learning from the very species they had once dismissed. Earth became a symbol of potential, of a species that had not yet reached its peak, but whose potential was boundless. It wasn't long before the galaxy began to change. New alliances formed, old rivalries faded. Species that had once hoarded knowledge now shared it freely, understanding that the pursuit of wisdom was far more valuable when combined with the drive to act. The universe, once a place of complacency for the immortal beings, now hummed with the urgency of 1,000 new beginnings. And as the stars continued to burn brightly in the night sky, a new era had begun, not one of immortality, but of living with purpose, with passion, and with the awareness that time was fleeting and precious. The Council of Elders would never be the same again, and in their quiet moments, as they looked at the bright, hopeful future ahead, they would always remember the human who had reminded them of what it truly meant to live. The winds of change swept through the galaxy, as the message of humanity's urgent approach to life spread like wildfire, igniting a cultural revolution across the cosmos. The species who had once regarded their immortality as a crown of superiority now felt the weight of its hollowness. The concept of a never-ending existence, which had been the foundation of their societies for millennia, no longer felt as fulfilling. Something was missing, and it was the fire that had driven the human race, their raw, unrelenting passion to live fully, no matter how brief their time in the universe. In the aftermath of the humans' words, the various species began to experiment in ways that had been unimaginable before. The Zarkin, with their boundless regenerative abilities, started organizing time trials, where each generation of Zarkin would try to accomplish something extraordinary in their short span of life, setting ambitious goals and pushing beyond their usual lethargy toward innovation. They began to prize the concept of experience over mere survival. They even began to build memorials not to their immortality, but to the lives lived within the constraints of time. The Grell, who had always followed the orders of their queens, began to grant more autonomy to their hive's workers. No longer would the drone be a mere functionary in the grand scheme. They were encouraged to create, to innovate, and to express themselves freely. The Grell hive, once a perfect machine of efficiency, was now a place of experimentation, where new ideas were nurtured alongside old traditions. They celebrated individuality in ways that no one had thought possible for their species. The Solans, who had existed as ethereal entities beyond the realm of time, began to forge connections with the younger, more vibrant species in the galaxy. They sought out the humans, the Zarkin, the Grell, any species that could teach them about the beauty of growth. They learned to embrace impermanence, their collective consciousness coming to understand that the fleeting moments of experience were as valuable as eternal existence. But among all these species, it was humanity that seemed to take the lead, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. Humans began to reach beyond their former limits. As they celebrated their short but meaningful existence, they transformed the very idea of progress. Scientific advancements exploded forward in ways that no one had predicted, driven by the awareness that every discovery could lead to something greater, each innovation, each breakthrough, a testament to their relentless desire to live fully. Perhaps the most profound change was the way the human race had begun to view the cosmos. Once, Earth had been a small, unremarkable planet, drifting in the vastness of space, inhabited by a species whose future seemed uncertain. But now, Humans saw the universe not as a distant void to be feared, but as a grand opportunity to make a difference, to leave their mark before time took it all away. Within a few centuries, humans had developed the first interstellar colonies, each one founded with the core belief that life's value came from its ability to adapt, grow, and leave behind a legacy. The first human-led exploratory fleets ventured beyond the Milky Way, reaching distant galaxies and seeking out new civilizations. Earth had become a beacon of vitality, where species from all corners of the universe traveled to learn from the human drive to live, to experience, and to grow. The Zarkin, once proud of their immortality, began to send their youth to Earth to study what they had lost, the irreplaceable zest for life that the humans had kept alive in their fleeting moments. The Grell hives welcomed humans into their complex networks, eager to share knowledge and to learn from the way humans embraced change. The Solans, though vast and unbounded, began to engage with the galaxy's younger civilizations in ways that were once beneath them. The spark ignited by the human speech had transformed them all. But even as the galaxy evolved and the immortals adapted, a quiet question lingered in the minds of the galaxy's most ancient species. Could they ever truly embrace life in the way humans did? Could they, who had seen the rise and fall of countless worlds, truly come to understand the urgency that fueled the human heart? The answer came during a grand summit on the newly established human colony on the planet Alara. Leaders from every species had gathered to celebrate the progress they had made together. The air was filled with the scent of alien flowers, and the sky above shimmered with the light of distant stars. It was here that the Zarkin leader, now much older than it had been when the human first spoke, stood before the assembly. "Many of you have come to me to learn from our wisdom," the Zarkin leader said, its voice soft but resonant. "But in truth, we have come to learn from the humans. They have taught us a lesson we never thought we needed. In the brief time we have spent with them, we have seen a new way of thinking, a new way of living." The Zarkin paused, gazing around at the other species who had gathered, now all understanding what had truly been said. "We thought that immortality was the greatest gift in the universe, but we now know that it is not. It is not how long we live, but how we live that defines us. The humans, who live only a fraction of the time we do, have shown us that life is not about the years we accumulate, but the moments we create." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The Zarkin leader's words were not just symbolic. They were a declaration. The galaxy's most ancient species were ready to move forward, not as immortal beings, but as living beings, ready to experience the universe once more with a sense of wonder and urgency that they had long since forgotten. And it was in this moment, on a small colony far from Earth, that the galaxy, no longer a cold and indifferent place ruled by ancient powers, became a shared space of growth, collaboration, and passion. Species that once viewed their immortality as an unshakable advantage now saw it for what it truly was, a gift only valuable when paired with a full appreciation of every moment, every heartbeat. As for the human who had sparked this transformation, they stood quietly at the edge of the summit, watching the stars above and feeling the weight of the world they had helped change. They knew that their work was far from over. There was still so much to do, so much to learn, and so many moments to live. But in their heart, there was no fear of time running out. They knew that as long as they lived with purpose, every moment would matter. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered. As the galaxy's great transformation continued, humanity found itself at the heart of a rapidly changing universe. A universe that was no longer ruled by the inertia of immortality, but by the dynamic energy of species embracing their brief existence with the same vigor that humanity had always known. The summit on Alara became a symbol, a gathering point for the new age of progress, where ancient beings and new civilizations came together to discuss the future, not as rulers of time, but as participants in it. Yet, as this new era unfolded, it also revealed a deeper truth. While the immortals of the galaxy had embraced the urgency of life, humanity, young, driven, and thriving, now found itself at a crossroads. The very energy that had fueled their rise, the urgency to make the most of their limited time, was beginning to evolve into something else, a race to achieve everything, to accomplish as much as possible before their fleeting lives ran out. It wasn't that they had forgotten the lesson they'd taught the galaxy, far from it, but the human drive to act was starting to accelerate in ways that were unsustainable. Innovation came in bursts. And progress was happening faster than anyone could process. New technologies, new philosophies, new frontiers, they all seemed to appear in a whirlwind, each one more daring and expansive than the last. But with it came a growing sense of pressure. Was there enough time to truly enjoy what they had created? Had they become so obsessed with achieving everything in their short lives that they were missing out on the very essence of what made them human? One such human, a scientist named Elena Kor, stood on the observation deck of a space station orbiting a distant star. Her eyes scanned the stars, reflecting on the path humanity had chosen. She had witnessed the incredible leaps forward, the way humanity had shaped its own destiny, and the universal respect it had earned. But now, she felt a question gnawing at her. What's the point of achieving it all? Elena whispered to herself. If we forget to experience it along the way? It wasn't a question just for her. The feeling had begun to permeate society. As humanity raced forward, there were voices calling for a return to the balance that had made their culture unique in the first place. They had embraced urgency, yes, but in doing so, they had almost lost sight of why they pursued greatness in the first place: to live, to be, and to savor the journey. Elena's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind her. "Penny for your thoughts?" a familiar voice asked. Elena turned to see her colleague, Jovan, a young engineer who had recently joined a high-profile terraforming project. His eyes were filled with the same enthusiasm that had propelled so many others to extraordinary achievements. But there was something in his face, a trace of doubt, that matched her own thoughts. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," Elena said, turning to face him. "The galaxy is ours now. We've done things no one could have imagined, but sometimes, I wonder if we're pushing too fast, too hard. Maybe in our quest to live fully, we're missing out on actually living." Jovan took a moment to consider her words. He'd always been a dreamer, but Elena had always been the one to ground his ambitions with reason. Now, even he seemed to be questioning the very thing that had driven them both. "I know what you mean," he said slowly. "We've built whole cities in days, traveled across galaxies, cured diseases in the blink of an eye, but is there any room to just exist in the moment? To enjoy what we've achieved without rushing off to the next big thing?" The conversation lingered in the air between them. There was no easy answer. Yet, in that moment, they both realized that something had shifted in the human race. It wasn't about stopping progress, but about recalibrating it. It was about finding harmony between striving for greatness and savoring the beauty of the journey. The quiet moments, the fleeting seconds that made life worth living. "I think we need to find a new balance," Elena said, her voice steady. "Maybe it's time we stopped defining ourselves by how much we can achieve and started defining ourselves by how well we can live, how well we can appreciate the time we have, not just the things we've done." Jovan nodded. "I think that's the next great frontier, not the stars or the galaxies, but how we choose to live in them." Over the following years, Elena and Jovan, along with a growing number of like-minded individuals, became part of a movement within humanity to redefine what it meant to live fully. This movement was not anti-progress, but rather a call for balance. It sought to integrate the remarkable drive for innovation and discovery with a renewed focus on quality of life, on appreciating the moments that made life meaningful. They called it the Lumen Initiative, a philosophy that encouraged humans to slow down, enjoy the journey, and rediscover the beauty of their fleeting existence. The Lumen Initiative spread quickly across human colonies, eventually reaching even the deepest corners of space. It resonated not only with humans but with species who had once dismissed such thoughts as unimportant. The immortal beings who had embraced the urgency of life found that, while they had gained a new vitality, there was still wisdom in taking the time to reflect, to be still, and to live in the present. At the heart of the movement was an idea that humanity had always held, that the true value of life was not in its length but in its depth. And as the galaxy's greatest minds came together to share their discoveries, they began to build a future where the race for progress was not a competition against time but a celebration of the time they had. The immortal species, who had once seen their longevity as an endless resource, now understood that the real treasure of life was not time, but how it was spent. For the first time in eons, they found themselves looking at humanity not as an anomaly or a young species struggling to catch up, but as a mirror, showing them a new way to exist, not just to endure. And so, as humanity took its place at the center of a new era, It wasn't just the legacy of progress that remained. It was the reminder that the greatest discoveries are often found in the spaces between the milestones, in the moments we pause to live fully, and in the simple truth that, in the end, living was the greatest achievement of all. The human race, once driven by the need to conquer time, had now become the beacon of a new kind of wisdom, not one of immortality, but one of awareness that time is fleeting, and it is in living with purpose, presence, and connection that we find the true meaning of existence. As the Lumen Initiative spread across humanity and the galaxy, the shift in perspective began to take root not just in the hearts of individuals, but in the very structure of civilization itself. The relentless pace that had once defined human progress began to slow. But it wasn't a halt, rather, it was a recalibration. Humanity had learned to cherish its time, to reflect, and to savor each moment, and that deepened their connection to the cosmos, their species, and each other. On Earth, the movement flourished. Cities that once buzzed with the frenetic energy of constant expansion now embraced quieter, more reflective spaces. Urban landscapes incorporated natural elements, parks, forests, and oceans, as places where people could reconnect with the world around them. Technology advanced, yes, but in ways that enhanced the quality of life, focusing on sustainability and well-being rather than endless consumption. The rush to build towering megastructures was replaced by a focus on creating communities where people could live in harmony with each other and the environment. But the Lumen Initiative wasn't just a human phenomenon. The galaxy's other species, inspired by humanity's ability to balance urgency with stillness, began to integrate these principles into their own societies. The Zarkin, still driven by their long lifespans, began to slow their cycles of technological advancement, instead fostering a culture that focused on the depth of knowledge they could gain in the present moment. They started to hold time-sharing gatherings, where they focused on communal experiences and stories of the past, teaching the younger generations to value not just progress, but wisdom passed down through careful reflection. The Grell, too, changed. The once highly efficient, regimented society began to prioritize individual expression and the value of free thought. Their once mechanized existence, built around tasks and productivity, gave way to artistic expression and exploration of personal potential. No longer were the drones simply tools, they were creators, artists, and thinkers. The hive became a place of shared experience, where the value of a life well lived was measured by the emotional connections created, rather than by the output achieved. Even the Solans, whose vast consciousness had long transcended physical forms, found themselves affected. They began to reconnect with the physical universe in ways they hadn't considered in eons, exploring fleeting sensations and experiences they had long left behind. The Solans' collective consciousness expanded to include a new appreciation for the impermanence of all things, a lesson learned from the human race. For the first time in their existence, they engaged with the concept of mortality not as a weakness, but as a source of beauty and growth. At the heart of this revolution was a fundamental idea: life was not meant to be an endless pursuit of achievement, but rather a journey to experience, to feel, and to grow. The question was no longer what one could do with time, but how one could live meaningfully within it. For Elena and Jovan, the pioneers of the Lumen Initiative, this shift felt like the culmination of their own personal journeys. They watched as the universe around them transformed, as other species adopted new ways of thinking, reflecting their own evolving attitudes about time and purpose. Their work, which had begun as a small philosophical movement, had become a galaxy-wide force for change. But even as they reveled in the collective progress, they couldn't ignore the occasional pang of doubt. Was this truly the right path? Was humanity losing its edge, its drive? Were they settling into a comfortable complacency, as the immortals once had? It was Elena who posed the question during a quiet night on a colony ship heading for a newly discovered world. "Do you ever wonder if we've gone too far?" she asked Jovan as they stood beneath the glittering expanse of stars. Jovan looked at her thoughtfully. "Sometimes, I wonder if the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. Maybe we've gotten so focused on being that we've forgotten how to do." Elena chuckled softly. "Maybe, but then I think about the immortals. They lived for so long, yet they lost the urgency to create, to push boundaries. We can't forget that hunger for discovery, but we also can't forget how to live, to appreciate the journey. It's all about balance." Jovan nodded. Maybe that's it. It's not that we need to choose one or the other. We just have to make sure we're living for the right reasons, achieving for the right reasons. Their conversation faded into the stillness of space, and they both felt a deep, quiet sense of resolve. Humanity had found its balance, but it was a balance that needed constant reevaluation. The universe was vast, and there was always more to learn, more to discover, and more to create. But the most important thing, they realized, was not the size of the achievement, it was the quality of the life that brought it into being. Back in the galaxy's farthest reaches, a new era was unfolding. The immortal species, once consumed by their endless years, now engaged in the world with the vibrancy of beings who understood the value of the present. The Zarkin, the Grell, the Solans, they all shared something new, a sense of urgency and reflection that transcended their centuries-long lifespans. But it was the humans who had given the universe the greatest gift of all, a reminder that life's greatest achievements weren't always in the future. Sometimes, the most important work was to simply be present, to live each moment fully. As the Lumen Initiative continued to guide the galaxy toward a brighter, more balanced future, Elena and Jovan stood together, looking at the stars once again. The galaxy had changed, and so had they. The universe had shown them that it was not time that defined greatness, but the way one chose to experience it. And in that realization, they found peace. For as long as they lived, they knew they had truly lived well. And that, they thought, was enough.